Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we are diving into a concept that could literally change how you manage your time, your relationships, and just your everyday life. It's this ancient, deeply profound idea called rightly ordered love. So whether you're a student completely buried in homework, a parent running on fumes, or just someone trying to get their priorities straight, the sources we are unpacking today offer a fresh, totally game-changing perspective on finding real freedom. To kick things off, our texts pose a pretty challenging question right out of the gate. What do you love first? And to be clear, this isn't about what we claim to love if someone asks us on the street. It's about taking a hard, honest look at our habits. Where are you actually making your daily sacrifices? The sources argue that if you want the real answer, you gotta look at your calendar, not just your ideals. And what's really fascinating here is just how perfectly normal these things look on the surface. The texts point out how incredibly easy it is for everyday stuff to sneak into that number one spot. I mean, we're talking about binging hours of Netflix after a rough day, burying yourself in nonstop studying, driving across the state for kids' sports every single weekend, or just working endless overtime for a bigger paycheck. Obviously, none of these things are inherently bad, but when our jam-packed modern schedules start pushing God out of the center, our true disordered priorities are totally exposed. Which brings us to Section 1, the danger of disordered love. So what exactly is disordered love? Well, the texts define it as elevating a lesser good completely above God. And it's tricky, right? Because our brains can so easily justify prioritizing genuinely good things, like our family, a favorite hobby, or our career. But the real danger strikes when that good thing becomes our absolute ultimate thing. The sources explain that when this happens, our will actually gets redirected. Think of it like an arrow turning away from the true source of love, and instead pointing entirely inward toward ourselves. And this leads to a pretty stark reality highlighted in the analysis. Disordered love is, frankly, no love at all. Let that sink in for a second. Without the ultimate good placed absolutely first, our whole foundation fractures. The texts argue that if our love is completely centered on our own desires, even if it's aimed at quote-unquote good things, it ultimately just becomes a shadow of what true love is actually meant to be. To really picture this, the sources use this brilliant contrast. On one side, imagine a solar system where God is the sun. Because the center has the perfect amount of gravity, everything else in your life, your family, your work, your downtime, orbits in complete harmony. But on the flip side, when we try to be the sun, or we put worldly goods in the center, the gravity is all wrong. The texts explain that this inevitably leads to a massive, tangled mess of anxiety, division, and basically a slavery to our own impulses. And that brings us to a really heavy word: idolatry. Now, the text clarifies this isn't about bowing down to golden statues like in the movies. It's defined as a disordered attachment. It happens when something beautiful, maybe it's academic success, a sport you excel at, or a relationship, starts to completely define who you are. When you're sacrificing everything just to serve that lesser good, it essentially becomes your God. And as the text warns, the thing you thought you possessed, it actually chains you down and possesses you. All right, moving on to Section 2, the Catholic logic of love. So, how do we actually fix this? Well, the early church fathers point to St. Augustine's Ordo Amoris, which translates to the order of love. It's basically a visual hierarchy for our human hearts. At the base level, we appreciate the world's goods like nature as beautiful reflections of creativity. Then, stepping up, we love ourselves as gifts to be offered. Above that, we love our neighbors through concrete, daily acts of care. And finally, at the very peak is God. The sources make it clear that building our lives in this exact order is what allows us to finally appreciate everything else properly. Now, if you've ever heard Jesus' command that you can't love your parents more than him, I know it sounds super harsh at first. But the source material clarifies this beautifully. Putting God first is actually like opening a massive umbrella. It absolutely doesn't diminish your family, it protects them. By putting God first, you are shielding the people you love from the crushing, impossible weight of having to be your ultimate idol. And once you get this hierarchy established, the sources say the fruits of rightly ordered love are just incredible. Because you aren't obsessively clinging to people or things anymore, you are finally free. It's like a bird flying out of an open cage. You're empowered to love people with actual patience. Your relationships become truthful and authentic, and you can give sacrificially without feeling like you're being robbed. This takes us to Section 3, the power of baptism. The theological text brings in this incredibly bold quote from St. Paul. He says, "Consider yourselves dead to sin and alive to God." And the sources really heavily emphasize this point. Having this perfectly ordered love isn't just some impossible ideal meant only for ancient saints and stained glass windows. No, it's actually a tangible grace. It's a profound inner shift that the texts say is entirely available to every single believer right now in the real world. Let's look at how this builds across what they call the arc of baptism. The sources describe it as this epic three-step transformation. First, in the past, death to sin's dominion. It loses its ultimate grip over you. Second, in the present, there is this ongoing purification and new birth. And third, looking toward the future, it's a full adoption into God's family. The theology here suggests this literally rewrites your spiritual DNA, giving your soul a brand new, natural alignment toward divine things. And guys, here is one of the absolute most empowering takeaways from the whole analysis. Sin no longer has the right to rule you. The texts make a really brilliant distinction here. Yes, you will still feel tempted. The monster is definitely still in the room. But think of your baptism like a shield. Because of it, sin literally has zero power over you, unless you voluntarily drop your guard and hand that power over. You actually have a choice. But there is a catch. A lot of people view their baptism purely as a past event, right? Just some dusty, forgotten moment from an old photo album when they were a baby. But the early church fathers insisted it has to be a living reality. The sources explain that physical actions, like making the sign of the cross with holy water, they aren't just empty rituals. They are specifically designed to actively wake up and maintain this powerful identity every single day. Which brings us to our final part, Section 4, Choosing the Cross Daily. The source material offers an incredibly practical tool to help maintain this. When temptation rises, whether that's a sudden wave of anger, or maybe you're obsessing over your social media status, the texts challenge us to use this exact phrase, I belong to Christ. It's a conscious, real-time moment of putting up that shield. It's actively refusing to let a lesser good rule over you and claiming your true identity right then and there. The texts also heavily emphasize the idea of taking up the cross. And taking up your cross simply means allowing God to constantly intervene and reorder our tangled loves. Because, let's face it, our priorities naturally drift over time, which is why meditating on the crucifix is so absolutely crucial. The cross acts as this mirror that exposes our false loves and our hidden idols, and through that very act of devotion, it actually begins to heal us. Let's tackle a really huge misconception while we're at it. The myth out there is that this Catholic order is just a heavy cage of restrictive rules meant to keep you down. But the source material reveals the complete opposite reality. Rightly ordered love is about absolute freedom. Christ died to free us from that obsessive, grasping, clutching control of our lives. When your loves are in the right order, you are finally, truly free to serve and love without fear or bitterness. As we wrap up this explainer, the sources leave us with a super provocative challenge, and I want to pass it directly on to you. Will you sincerely ask the Holy Spirit to reveal your true priorities this week? Look, it might be a little uncomfortable to see exactly where your loves have become tangled or changed to lesser things, but as the texts promise, that honest self-reflection is the absolute first step toward experiencing authentic freedom. So what do you love first? Think about it. Thanks for learning with us today, and we'll see you on the next explainer.